that sophisticated neural network enables the gut to function completely autonomously. So even when the neural connection to the brain, the vagus nerve, is severed, it'll still work, which is kind of crazy. Like, it gives you an idea of just how complex the body is and how much we really don't fully understand.
A lot of studies now are showing just how tightly linked the gut microbes that you might have in your body or not have in your body could be linked to your mood, depression, things like that.
Harry, my good friend, how are you doing today, buddy? Right. Good to see you. You've got your setup.
I know. I was in a bit of a rush as you shocked me at the timings and stuff, but I was in the middle of cooking at the time, and now I've sorted myself out, and I'm sorting out the camera and the sound and the headphones. So hopefully everything's improving for those watching and listening, but it does take a little bit of time setting all this up. So I've been rushing about, to be honest, at the moment. A little bit stressed, if I'm honest. Mainly because, and you might have this experience at some point, I don't know, but like, I'm trying to help my mum with decluttering, right? She's a little bit of a hoarder, and we're trying to sell the house that she's was in with my dad, and it is under offer, firm offer actually, but anything can go, like with house sales. So either way, whether we move or whether we have to relist it, whatever, it still needs to be decluttered. So there's been a lot of stress. And I actually found myself losing my rag a little bit the other day for the first time in probably a decade.
Harry.
Now, now I think it was a combination of things. And I was saying this to my mum as well. This was on Saturday, it must have happened, because I think I didn't eat properly that morning. Or drunk enough water. I didn't do my exercise. Didn't shower that day because I wanted to get things. So there was a bunch of things going on. And then also there's the overwhelm that I'm feeling going into the house, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me, even though, cause one of my sisters in Brighton, and she's got her own headaches. My other sister's got 3 kids and, works full time, like in a normal job. So it's kind of on me to do a lot of the stuff. And so I think there was a bit of that. And then when I look around the house, me, I like my order and tidiness and everything. And my parents' house is not like that. And so I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, and I just want to go in a bit like my dad wanted to do, is just like throw everything out. And my mum just, today even, she was like holding on to like random maps from like places and things. And like, you never ever look at these maps. You're never going to use these. And it's such a battle. And I lost my rag on Saturday, and then I kind of felt bad. So I bought her kind of really my favorite chocolates, but becoming her favorite chocolates, these vegan Booja Booja truffles, and as a way of apology. Although we still had a bit of a shout yesterday and today when I was clearing things out. And I think it's going to be that way, but it's really hard. And I feel like I just want to go away for 3 months and not deal with it. So yeah, I'm feeling a little bit stressed from all that. But how are you doing? You're looking actually still quite tanned.
Yeah, well,
unless it's the lighting you've got set up.
The tan has stayed. It might be a little bit of the lighting as well. I think I've been staring at white lights doing podcasts all day. It's like my 4th of the day now. So obviously on different channels, different shows. So I'm a little bit all zoned out looking at studio lights. And while you've been doing dinner, I'm still standard doing my usual work thing, not leaving my desk kind of day. So this is the last podcast of the day. So I'm energized by that in a good way. I always love meeting you. How else has everything else been? Everything else has been good. My mum came up for the weekend, which was great. First time she's ventured out on her own, driven this far to come see me without my dad in my dad's old car. So really proud of her for
well done.
Yeah, being able to make that shift. So she showed a lot of courage. And actually, there's been some good news. I think I can say it because this will come out after I get the award, which is I got a call out of the blue to say that I'm winning something called the Global Vision Award, which is probably one of the most prestigious awards you can win in the world of payroll. It's been provided by Payroll Congress. I'm going out to Nashville. I'm going to win that award for my services to the payroll industry, which is pretty cool, very unexpected.
Congratulations.
Would have made my dad very proud, so that was quite nice. And then at the weekend, despite having little motivation to exercise, I got an email through on Friday, and it was an entry to a race I'd entered that I had no idea I'd entered. It came out late. My mum was up, so we'd already opened the wine earlier. We ended up 2 bottles of wine, literally had fish and chips, deliveries, and all the worst prep you could have. And this email popped in, and I didn't even know what race I was doing. I had to email the organizer and said, like, which race am I doing? Because there were several distances. And she was like, doing a half marathon. I was like, okay. That's fine. So I said to my mum, do you mind if I go down in the morning, just do the race, and I'll see you after, and we'll take the dogs for a walk along the beach. So I haven't done much exercise at all, put on a fair bit of weight and stopped doing various things since my dad passed. But we rocked up at the event with no real prep and won the race. So that was quite nice.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. Your biggest fitness skill is your mental capacity, I think, in these races. It's always impressed me. It's the difference. Actually, I do want to share a couple of things with you that I watched over the weekend that I think you might like. But yeah, well done.
Yeah, please. Actually, probably in complete contravention to what we're going to discuss today, which is about gut health and nutrition. I mean, I had a really bad nutritional setup for that race, but I do think mentally it came in. I think I probably just needed to run off the cobwebs and run in a bit of frustration and emotion or whatever. I won by almost 10 minutes, so I was kind of on my own for most of the race, which was great.
What kind of race was it? Was it a run race or?
Yeah, it was a half marathon coastal trail race. So it was called 400 meters of elevation along the trail paths. I did it in 1:29, which is
wow,
4 minutes quicker.
That's faster than my one and only half marathon I did in 2004. I think 20 years ago I did a half marathon around Silverstone racetrack, which I was also a bit last minute with that one. I was told the night before because my sister's friend had pulled out. And so I hadn't done any training. I wasn't a runner. I'd never run that distance anyway. But I did it in 1:35 or 1:33. But I actually tell this story a lot because I tell it to students about this idea about keep moving forward and momentum. Because I remember I was about 10 miles in and I'd done the 10 miles in, I think just over an hour. I mean, it was really fast paced. It was maybe like 70 minutes or something like that. Yeah. And I decided that I thought, well, I've got 3.1 miles left. I'm going to stop and rest for a bit so I can really blitz it for the last 3.1 miles. And I stopped for about 5 minutes. And what a mistake that was, because then when I started up again, I couldn't start. And it just, couldn't move. It took me another 10 minutes to kind of move, which is why I ended up finishing beyond an hour 30. Because I was like, oh my God, if I do an hour 30, that's a 3-hour marathon pace. That's like unbelievably quick, certainly for me and for most people, I imagine, maybe not yourself. But I learned that lesson, like always keep going. Even if I'd gone to a crawl, it would have been better than stopping. You know, it's all about moving forward and building momentum. Actually, I mean, have you must have heard of adventure racing, right? Have you heard of adventure racing where you kind of like have to? So for those listening, I think it's like a combination of hiking, canoeing, running, orienteering, and I think you can go your own route. You just got to get to the transition stages. And I was watching this movie. It's a new movie that came out with Mark Wahlberg, true story about a guy doing his kind of adventure race. I think you would like it. Actually, I'm not sure if it's too soon for you because it's right up your street, but it does have a very emotional arc with a dog in it.
That's fine. I'll manage that. But I did actually apply for the Bear Grylls Adventure Race Series 2, but they end up.
Well, he's in it. He was in it. He voiced it because it was him as himself, but it was just his voice. But it was a really moving story, a true story about this team doing.
Well, I'll check it out.
In 2015. So check that one out. And then the other one I thought you might quite like as well, and we watched it last night with my mum, and she quite liked it, is this Netflix one called Naiad, which is about the true story of this woman who back in the 70s was like an ultra marathon swimmer. And she had it in her sight.
I think I put it on my watch list. Yeah.
Yeah, so she had it in her sights to swim from Cuba to Florida when she was 28 and failed. And then at 60 decides to attempt it again. I won't give anything away, but let's just say, it's about persistence and it's pretty cool. So watch those two, I think you'd really like.
No, right up my street. I mean, I've got the second one on my watch list already. I've just started watching, completely unrelated, but I'll mention it because I'm quite enjoying it, Baby Reindeer, which I haven't finished yet, but I've been told I've got to watch it beyond the credits. And that's a true story, but
I've not heard of that.
It literally has nothing else to do with the conversation except for the fact I'm telling you what I'm watching at the moment. Although your 10-mile bit was similar to the race at the weekend. So the second half of the race was all the climbs and all the trail paths. So I just thought I'd hammer it the first 12K. I got there in... I did the first 10 miles in just over an hour. 15K in about 58 when it was, but thinking I'll have a nice lead and then just let everyone catch me up on the trail pass, because obviously all your pace slows down when you start going up and down huge climbs. But no one caught me, so yeah, I just quite enjoyed a bit of run on my own. Really, with scenic,
Wow.
seaside, it was lovely on my own. It's great. Yeah, got off a bit of an unexpected result, and that's 2 awards in a week. So if these things do come,
you're doing well, mate. You're doing well. Nashville sounds cool as well.
Yeah,
it sounds like a good space
I go
to go to. But
this Thursday.
But we did talk about for months and months that we'd be talking about gut health, and actually, I think like a good lead into this might be to maybe recap with the listeners who may have missed that episode. I think it was maybe like 4 or 5 episodes ago that you were saying how you'd done some kind of test. I can't remember exactly which one, whether it was a stool test or whether it was
I've done a few tests. I mean, I've been struggling for some time with various gastrinal issues, shall we say. And I thought, you know what? I do a lot of exercise. I get real bad gastrinal problems when I'm running, in particular in the Ironman and stuff. And actually, a lot of people do. So I thought maybe I always just put it down to it's a tough event. It just must be that. But then they've been getting worse regardless of what I'm doing. And I don't sleep well either, which you know. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to get full analysis done. So I did the Zoe thing, which a lot of people have done, which I don't know, probably better assessments out there if you haven't done it. If you have, the results are still useful. But I think there's probably a cheaper, easier way of getting some of those results back. But I also did some other tests. I did a York test, which was intolerance tests. And I basically did everything I could to get a better understanding of my body. And it came back with some interesting insights, one of which was some foods that I'm intolerant to, which I'm testing. I've removed gluten. I've, in inverted commas, removed gluten. I haven't been as disciplined as you would be, Harry. I remove it as much as I can, but I can't say I've had a complete gap. I haven't at all. There's other, like I'm supposed to remove yeast came up really bad, wheat came up bad, gluten came up bad. So all the things are kind of associated with gluten. And since cutting it out, I've noticed a miraculous difference. So even though I've fallen off the wagon because I enjoy the foods too much occasionally, actually, if I stay on it, I feel much, much better. And I would suspect that's had some impact on my performance in races and things as well, albeit relatively new. But also as part of those assessments, it also did analysis on the good gut bacteria and the bad gut bacteria that was present in my gut. And actually the results came out pretty good as far as good could be. You get greens across the board, which is kind of seen as good rather than amber or red. But it did give me some insights in some of the good bacteria that my body was missing, which other people may have. And your gut microbiome is very much dictated by what you expose yourself to. So that could be culturally, the types of foods, where you travel to, where you live. And it your culture, if you like, grows with you as you grow through experience. And certain things can absolutely decimate it. So, we're very quick in a doctor's. You go to a doctor and run well. Doctors sometimes be very quick to prescribe antibiotics, and as I've discovered, antibiotics absolutely decimate your gut microbiome, and it can it can take over a year or longer to really replenish the bacteria that gets wiped out. And it's a good example as to why we need to think more about what we put in our bodies, even if it's prescribed. There might be better ways to come over it. And that's maybe a slightly separate conversation, but what it has given me is a really good education, because I've now followed a research path to understand my body better, not just taking on the guidance from the experts and the results, but actually reading up on this information a lot more to understand my body. And for those that don't know that listening to this, I mean, Harry is an expert in nutrition and vitality. He's obviously a published author on the subject. Back in the day, I've also done quite a few qualifications in sports nutrition. I was a qualified dietitian, but I can't say I am now, although I may have still have the certification. I haven't practiced in years, but I've got a pretty good foundational understanding of sports nutrition and some of the things that can help performance and phytochemicals and things the body needs for optimal cell function, things like that. So it kind of gave me some inspiration to look back into the subject. And I'm now taking a completely different probiotic. Following my assessment than I was taking before. I had some specialist consultation done, and the consultant said, look, what's the probiotic you're taking? And I told her, she went, it's great, but it's giving you all the probiotics and all the bacteria you've already got in abundance. What you need to do is take a probiotic specifically for you that has the good that is full of the good gut bacteria that you don't have. And it never really occurred to me. I was definitely influenced by the numbers on things like Amazon. Went to Amazon and said this has 4 million, of this type, and it's like actually
we can talk about that. I think
we can, but they also tend to prescribe, or that these things you buy online tend to give you the bacteria that are very, very common in most people's gut anyway. So what you really want to do is build the culture, build the diversity in your gut to give you the best route to health.
Well, I mean, a lot of those bacteria don't make it all the way through the digestive tract anyway. But I think like it's worth. You said a lot of things there, and I think it's worth backing up for a few people who maybe are kind of thinking, scratching their head and going, okay, what are they talking about? Microbiome, what is this? I always try and create my analogies and make things simple for people. But one thing that I probably only really appreciated maybe like 12 years ago is that we're not just human cells, right? We're the trillions and trillions of bacterial cells, and they live all over our body, like in and on our body, a huge concentration being in the gut, right? The stomach, as it were. But think of it like a forest, right? Your gut is like a forest, and it's inhabited by millions of, or actually trillions of these creatures that need to thrive and feed and stuff. And what you were talking about there with the antibiotics, it's like dropping an atomic bomb on everything. It kills all the bad bacteria, but it kills all the good bacteria. I always tell like anyone who's on antibiotics, make sure you take probiotics at the same time as well. You can take them like maybe an hour or two later, but we are an overprescribed nation when it comes to antibiotics, since having antibiotic resistant bacteria. But I remember as a kid, and this might have been similar for you, but we used to get prescribed antibiotics for every little bit here and there, and it's crazy. And the gut is kind of is resilient to some degree, but it's also it's hard to rebuild, as you said, right? So if you've got antibiotics, it can take a long time for your gut to rebuild. But there's a lot of things that we do in society which are actually damaging the environment for those good bacteria to thrive in. And some of it starts the moment we're born, ironically enough, right? I'm not sure how much you're familiar with, but when you have when a person has a C-section, that baby misses out on all the stuff that you'd be getting through the vaginal canal. It's actually a really good idea if you are having a C-section to smear all that on the baby afterwards.
Well, actually, what I'm going to just intersect here just briefly, because I do have some knowledge on this on the basis that obviously my mum's background being a doctor and she specializes in baby development studies and this, that, and the other. For anyone listening to this who's expecting a child, you are able to, and it's not really about gut bacteria, but I think it's relevant because I didn't know this, and my sister's done it, fair play, and I wish we had, because you never know where it could use it. But there are services out there that allow you to store the stem cells, which are only available for a short period of time. And it's the stem cells that can potentially save your new child from a range of potential diseases and things that may impact them later on in life. So the NHS don't tell you this. It is a paid-for service, but it's not overly expensive considering the life-saving properties that they can have. So if you are expecting a child, if you know anyone that is, get them to look into stem cell, looking after stem cells post-birth. I think you've got to catch them within the first half an hour of birth, and they arrive and
that's interesting.
Store them.
Yeah,
the price for storing them, I think, but I think their life-saving properties make it worthwhile. So it's a slightly separate thing, but no one ever talks about.
Yeah, I mean that's probably a conversation to talk about stem cells, because stem cells is something I've been looking into on and off for a few years, and I sometimes wish I'd kind of we had that knowledge where you could save your baby stem cells, as it were, or the umbilical cord stem cells, I think, or whatever it might be. But actually, then I've also heard some conflicting things from experts by saying, actually, even if you're taking adult stem cells from yourself, it's just as good almost as the baby stem cells. I don't know. I haven't looked into it enough for that. But what I'm saying is that in terms of going back to the gut microbiome, right, sometimes like all of my 3 nieces from one of my sisters were all C-sections for various reasons, and it puts them on the back foot. However, there are other things that you can do, like if you're breastfed, for example, that also builds up your immune system. And I think it's worth saying,
even having a pet in the house, to be fair.
Well, this is what I was saying to my sister the other day, because The pets, they go outside, they rummage around in the soil, they bring that in, they lick, they do all these things, and you're getting all of these good bacteria that we need. But most of our immune health resides in the gut, right? About 70% of our immune health is derived from the gut. And if you don't have a healthy gut, and we can talk about what other things might go wrong with you if you don't have a healthy gut. But when you realize that actually your immune health is, and I think we can kind of know this on a intuitive basis, right? If you go out for a weekend stag do and you're not sleeping, which sleep is also a massive impact on your immune health, but you're eating McDonald's every day, you're drinking all that, you're going to end up pretty ill by Monday, right? Same goes for me. I could do all my wonderful beat model stuff and then I'll go away for 3 days and I'm going to be more resilient maybe than the next person, but it will still hit me in a way that I'll notice. So immune health is probably one of the big ones when it comes to, the gut that you need to look for. And I think it was Hippocrates, the father of modern, ancient medicine. Hippocrates is all disease begins in the gut. I don't know if you've heard that.
I have. I think we talked about it briefly in the last episode because he has more.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing because things he was what? I don't know, top of my head. What was he?
It was
500 BC, like
that? So like 2,500 years ago. But this goes back to my theory last time we were talking about with aliens telling people what's what. But I think like when people realize that the cells that they are, like our cells are constantly dying and being rebuilt, right? We are not really the same body that we were even 7 years ago. I think pretty much most cells, maybe there's some brain cells that don't regenerate, but pretty much every other cell in your body regenerates on a matter of weeks, months, or sometimes years. Those cells that get regenerated, the matter has to come from somewhere. That matter comes from the food that you ingest primarily. And so if you're eating chemicals and plastic, and which most people are, we've got like thousands of different plastics in us, unfortunately. Our body is made up of those things, quite simply. And so you have to really think about if you build a house using rubbish materials, it's not going to last very long. And it's the same thing. I guess go with this house analogy. You can't just build a house usually with one material, right? You need to have different types of material. You use steel, you use brick, you use cement, you use wood, you use all of these things. It's the same with the bacteria. There needs to be loads of different bacteria in order to create a strong, sturdy foundation.
Just to build on that as well, it's not just about the foundation from the way the good thing is here, we're doing a rare conversation where I think we're in full agreement in terms of the importance of gut health, which is a rare thing and a nice thing. The way we go about it might be different, but it's also, in using your house analogy, it allows you to be less susceptible to the elements, whether that's wind, rain, or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die early if you eat with a bad health. It just increases the chances that you might, because you're going to be more susceptible to illness and disease and the things that come with it. Going back interesting on your Hippocrates quote, the one I like is, before you heal someone, ask him if he's willing to give up the things that make him sick, which is I think
that's it.
We want to talk about in the past, like the people, if they're not familiar with the term microbiome, I think there's a couple of things worth highlighting. One is, a lot of this is relatively new science. So if you haven't really done biology and studied this stuff since you were at school and you're my age, you wouldn't have necessarily come across a lot of this. But it's the gut microbiome is often referred to as the body's second brain. And that's because it's a lot of chemicals people don't realize are produced, neurotransmitters, neurochemicals are actually produced in the gut, not in the brain. And some of those are things like serotonin, which has a huge impact on the way our well-being, on sleep, dopamine being another. We often associate dopamine as being this hormone or this neurotransmitter in the brain that gives us these things. That's produced in the gut. Melatonin, another one linked to sleep, another one that's produced in the gut. And then these things are used to regulate mood, emotional well-being, digestion, general health, cognition. And I think when we think of cognition, we assume, therefore, it must be produced in the brain, but it's not. And there's something called the gut-brain axis, which allows for communication via neural, hormonal, and immunological pathways that impacts everything we do, from our emotions to our physical health. So when you and I are talking about, and you in particular, are talking about putting good things into our bodies, I think it's really important that listeners understand that the close connection what we put into our bodies has to the hormones and the chemicals that we often only associate with cognitive function or our brains or emotional well-being. They're so closely connected. It's why they call it the second brain. So if we get that bit right, we're going to sleep better. We're going to be more emotionally stable. We're going to be more resilient to the things you've talked about. We're going to have better general well-being, better general health. So I just wanted to, people aren't familiar with the second brain idea. That's what it's about.
I mean, often as well, I mean, we'll talk about the second brain for the gut, but I often think of it as well as the heart. And I think the more and more I look at everything, there isn't a demarcation, in my view, between things like, say, the brain and the rest of the body. And the reason I say that is because we are one holistic system. And this is where the reductionist approach that we've been following for the last 100 or so years probably falls down a little bit, because you look at one area of the body, you go, right, let me study that, which of course we need people to study specifics and become specialists, but not at the expense of not seeing the fuller picture. And so everything works in a symbiotic relationship. Just like if you were to look at the planet from afar, you don't see necessarily the individual people, but you'll see, let's say, you'll see all the flow of the traffic and the lights and the movement of things. And it's the same with the gut. There are literally trillions and trillions of bacteria there that are effectively made your gut their home. And they're hungry as well, and they need to be fed. And the thing is, if they don't get fed properly, or they get fed stuff that they don't really like, well, one, they'll become accustomed to it. So if you feed them like sugary things all the time, that's what you're going to be craving. You'll have that craving. That can go. You can work on that over a period of days. But they'll start to eat, basically you. And what happens is then your immune cells feel like your immune cells feel like your body's been under attack, and then they'll lead to inflammation. You could end up with like the normal gut issues that a lot of people have, but also, like you were talking about, serotonin, right? It's a mood enhancer. So a lot of studies now are showing just how tightly linked the gut microbes that you might have in your body or not have in your body could be linked to your mood, depression, things like that. And you could always argue, well, are depressed people using more of those microbes, or is it the lack of those microbes causing them depression? Like most things, it might be a bit of a two-way street. But what is quite interesting, and we can talk about some of this stuff in a bit more detail, but there was this one study that I was watching earlier today, actually, when I was watching this Netflix show on the gut, which only came out a couple of days ago. And interestingly, features the guy, Tim Spencer, I think, from one of the founders of the Zoe stuff that you were talking about before. But they took, I think it was healthy human twins who were, one was obese and one was normal weight. And I think they took certain microbes from both of those twins and put them into rats, and then two different rats. And the rat that had the obese microbes from the obese twin became like obese, and the other one was normal. And interestingly enough, you've probably have you heard of like FMT?
Yeah.
I guess it. Yeah. So the fecal microbial transplant, for those people that want to know. And essentially what that means is you take effectively your feces from one like healthy adult and put it into another person. And I think it's only authorized, or it's only approved for very limited, I think it's C. diff or something like that. It's limited for like one illness, one disease, but it has a 90% success rate. But the show that I was watching earlier, I first heard of FMTs maybe like 10 years ago, but like you say, Nick, it's a recent science, microbes, maybe like last 10, 15 years, understanding the gut. But they took this one woman, she was suffering her whole life with gastro issues. And so she started taking fecal implants, or you can do it different ways. You can take it as a pill, you can take it as an enema, you can take it as up the wrong pipe, as it were. And so there's different ways of doing it. But she took her brothers, and her brother used to have, he was generally healthy, but he used to have some sort of acne or something like that. He has predisposed hormonal acne or something like that. So she started to fix herself from all those things, but then developed acne. So then she started doing her boyfriends, who was generally healthy but had mental health issues. And then she noticed her depressive states were getting worse and things like that. So she actually switched back to her brothers. It was like really interesting. But she was doing a DIY version, which don't even ask me how you do that, but it involves poop in a blender and a freezer, and it's not very pleasant. And it's not really recommended, by the way, just yet, because you could take the bad as long as with the good.
But like any of this, right, it's like with coaching, like awareness is key. And awareness is the first step as well to understanding. If we know how much food impacts us, impacts our sleep, impacts our vitality, if we understand some of the chemicals that are created in the gut. And actually, I did have someone say to me, no, serotonin is produced not just in the gut. And they were right, but 95% of it is produced in the gut. Rather than getting into the semantics of it, there's enough to say you need to take this stuff seriously. And you were right? The gut microbiome has over trillions and trillions of bacteria, and not just bacteria, other microorganisms as well that inhabit our intestinal tract. And they do more than just aid digestion. And you were talking about, when we think all they do is aid digestion, but that's the reality, is they do an awful lot more. Serotonin being just one of those examples about mood and well-being. But you were talking then about the guy who does the Zoe thing, and some of the other studies that I was reading about has proven that the gut has its own independent nervous system. There's an intricate network of 100 million neurons embedded in the gut wall, which is referred to as the enteric nervous system, which I think we've discussed very briefly before, or as I've already mentioned today, the second brain. But what's interesting here is that sophisticated neural network enables the gut to function completely autonomously. So even when the neural connection to the brain, the vagus nerve, is severed, it'll still work, which is kind of crazy. Like, it gives you an idea of just how complex the body is and how much we really yet don't fully understand. We're already seeing, though, that when I do Ironman and I read Triathlete magazine and things like that, the amount of supplements now coming into the market that are focus on optimizing gut health and gut microbiome for improved endurance, for improved recovery times, for improved performance. You can see companies now releasing things about ketones that help with brain function and cognitive function, all these different things that people are starting to get a better understanding about how it can impact the body, not just in terms of day-to-day health, but actually in terms of really high-level performance as well. And I think there's still loads and loads that isn't yet fully understood here, but I think there's enough evidence to suggest that consuming a balanced diet rich in fiber, probiotics, prebiotics, something that really flourishes our gut, I don't know what my word is, fauna, overall health.
Well, flora and fauna, if you go by the forest analogy, to be fair. And I think, we need not just the other thing to note with the microbiome as well is that in different parts of the world, you're going to have different types of microbiome. And so now we eat food from all over the world, which can be a good and a bad thing, because
depends what's used to help it travel, right?
Well, it's not just that. It's that, like, obviously, like, genetically, my ancestry is, I guess, more Mediterranean. But in different areas, you're going to have different genetic predisposition to certain things that your ancestors would have grown up in that environment. So if you're eating food that came from halfway around the world, that's feeding a microbiome that maybe wasn't meant for you as well. So it's just something interesting to note. And also your microbiome changes a lot when you travel and the time zones, because there's effectively like a little clock in every single cell in our body, and they all get reset at different times when you travel.
They do say, though, the people, which I think makes sense, the people that are most are well traveled to culturally often will have the most diverse microbiome, and that makes sense. If you never leave your town, or you'll never leave your house, you're only exposed to the same food, to the same people. It makes sense that actually, if you are I'm not saying that's the only reason, but if you are well traveled and exposing yourself to different foods, different cultures, different pets, animals, environments, sand, woodland, mountain, whatever, you're going to be exposed to different types of these trillions and trillions of bacteria, which can help give you more rounded, potentially more bad bacteria, of course, as well. But overall,
and I think it's important to note that, like, even if you eat healthily, like, and I maybe suffer with this issue sometimes, is that I eat a lot of vegetables, right? I eat maybe like 10, 15 portions of vegetables a day. However, they tend to be the same sorts of vegetables most days, right? That I put in the smoothies, put in my salads, whatever. And you need probably 20 to 30 different types of vegetables a week to get enough of that balance of the flora and fauna that you need, if you like, for your gut. I think I probably do get that because that also is not just vegetables. It's things like your parsleys and your celery and your what do you call it, cilantro. Can't remember what the English word for cilantro is now. Coriander. It's the coriander, the parsley, the mint, even the mushroom powders. All of those contribute to those 30. So I probably do get about 30 or more different types. But the other thing is that's something we don't do a huge amount of in the UK that is big in Asia, is fermented foods, right? Fermented foods are like the superfood you want for your gut. Whether that's kimchi or sauerkraut. What do we do in the UK? Those pickled something or other, but anything like that. Any fermented foods is unbelievably good for your gut. I actually haven't got any in. I used to go for a phase of having sauerkraut quite often.
To give some info on the analysis, the results that I got back, I mentioned earlier about some of the issues I was having with in the intolerance to gluten, wheat, yeast, and those kinds of foods. And to put it into perspective, I did an assessment. It was 194 different types of food analysed. I had 5 foods pop up in my potential intolerant list. Anything over a score of 20 was considered intolerant. I should cut out. Gluten came up with a score of 93. I mean, that's pretty high. Yeast 80. But all the other foods that came in, wheat and the others, were around about 30, 35. But those two in particular, almost off the scale, along with cow's milk, funnily enough. But when I spoke to the consultant, this isn't via Zoe, this is via a different company. They had a specialist gut bacteria consultant who gave me part of the service was a half an hour review of my gut health and what gut I had presence of that. And she said to me that I've got the ones I'm missing are ones that would typically be involved in reducing inflammation, enhancing digestion, and protecting against pathogens. I was like, okay, well, that's three pretty big things. There is something, so you've pretty much got a leaky gut. Like the food, the gluten you've been eating has created holes in your gut wall that's probably causing all the excessive flatulence and everything else is experiencing, and the cramps and everything else. So she's given me a specific mix that has, this will probably mean nothing to most people, but in case they have similar problems to me, I'll read them out, right? So I've got a particular gut bacteria probiotic, which has 4 different strains of lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, acidophilus kefir, bulgaricus, and bifidum live organisms. There you go. By all means, rewind and read that again, so I've probably done that no justice.
But those make it complicated.
There you go. But they're the particular strains that she said would really help give me a broad range of health benefits, will give me a more resilient digestive system, will help promote a stronger immune response. She said that there's lots of studies that have shown that bacteria like Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium longum are particularly strong in helping those issues. But what's interesting when you look into it further, now this isn't something that I necessarily struggle with, but there'll be others that do. There are also a huge amount of links between gut inflammation and gastrointestinal disorders with things like depression and anxiety. That actually, if you're struggling with some of those conditions, by just improving the bacteria in your gut, if you can reduce your gut inflammation, actually you might find it improves your mood because it alters the brain biochemistry. If you're able to reduce the chronic gastrointestinal disorders, things like irritable bowel syndrome, you're probably going to reduce the anxiety and depression that's associated with those things as well. So there's a lot of research. It's still at early phase, to be honest, on how gut bacteria can impact human psychological well-being. But it does suggest from the early study reports, and you can Google these to find them yourselves. I've had to read through quite a few of them. It does suggest that probiotic supplementation, if you get the right supplementation, can reduce a lot of these potential issues that we might be struggling from, especially in relation to wellness, well-being, anxiety, depression. And I think people are going to continue to try and unravel, the complexities of this gut-brain connection. But I think, who knows, you just mentioned a lot about the future of medication might just be that we're not taking medications at all, that we're just happier and we dance more and we sing more and we do the right things. This could be a new process for treating more effective ways of psychological or physiological disorders. Who knows?
The thing is with these psychological disorders, there's a whole spectrum, right? As everything, but it's on the rise, and I think I can't help but think that predominantly our modern lifestyles are to blame for almost all of the increases. Be that the food that we're eating, the ultra processed food, right? So UPFs will massively contribute to your poor moods. It does for me, and I can notice it within hours. Like your gut microbes will change within a day of changing them anyway, in terms of what you're eating. But whether it's sitting in boxes all day and artificial lights and not getting outside and not exercising, not connecting with people, all of those things are affecting our mood. And we know that for like depression, even clinical depression, a really strong driver for improving that is exercise. And if you think about exercise and food, which are two of the big pillars, right? Sleep, exercise, and food, three massive pillars. If you dial those in, right? So you get your whatever you need to sleep a night, right? For most people, it's 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep a night. If you get your movement in, right, that 150 minutes a week, or getting up and moving all the time throughout the day, and then you change your diet so that you're eating unprocessed real foods with 30 different types of vegetables a week, I think you would be a different person totally in less than 4 weeks, if not sooner. And I think people want to make it more complicated than it is a lot of the time. And it is simple. I'm not saying it's easy. And I was thinking about this today. It's actually really, 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 really hard to change a diet, right? Change a diet. Because I think about things that I could do even better, right? And there's a lot of things I could do with my diet that are even better, even though you might think, oh, Harry, you do loads anyway. And maybe I do compared to the average person. But I think it's actually hard for me to do those changes. The changes I did make, which were predominantly around 10, 12 years ago, they happened almost not instantly, but they happened effortlessly because I didn't have to resist. I just had a change of thinking in my brain, which then led me not to feel resistance to making those changes. So you were talking about gluten before, and it's a struggle. And actually, I've started to ease up a little bit, and I eat a few things with gluten-containing ingredients these days. But for many years, I didn't. It wasn't that I was struggling to not eat those things. I had just made a decision several years earlier that I wasn't going to do that. And because, like, you feel better when you have those things out of your life, I just remember that. And I go, I feel amazing when I do the right things. And when I don't feel amazing. And so why not just do the right things? It is hard though, right? Because we're in these patterns. But mostly I think it's because people don't realize how good they can feel. If I had a magic wand, and one of the things I would like to do is, like, you go to a person and say, for the next 24 hours, you're going to live, like, you got to feel in your body and in your mind how you could feel if you did these things for the next year, let's say. And I'd love for them to be able to experience that for like a day, because then when they go back, they'll go, I actually changed something. Next year, I'll be feeling like this amazing, or next week, I'll be feeling this amazing. I think that'd be a really powerful motivator for people.
No, I'd agree.
Really,
I mean, we're living in a time of total abundance. Like, it's the best it's ever been if we want it to be. I was watching an interesting Instagram reel the other day with Jimmy Carr talking about, only 50 years ago, people didn't have hot showers. Like, we take these things for granted, and we have more illnesses and more depression and more anxiety in the world now than ever. And there's also a bigger population as well. I think talking about your diet, though, and mine, we always talk about doing things with awareness. I think that's the first piece. And I think I don't like the term diet at all anyway. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach to health and vitality. You've got to find out, from my perspective, you might disagree with me here, but you need to find out the things that do the nutritional changes that work best for your situation. Yours and mine are different. I think there are some staples in there that can help with that. And I'll talk about those. I'm sure you will as well in just a minute. But I think sometimes when you're thinking about making changes, it's important to emphasize the nutritious foods you want to add in rather than the unhealthy foods you just want to eliminate. Sometimes, I'm not saying you don't want to do both, but I think there's too much association with immediately looking at how we can restrict what we do rather than add to. If you add enough nutritious food, the funny thing is you won't need to restrict it because you won't crave it. You won't want it in the same way. And sometimes by just restricting ourselves in the first instance before we add in the good stuff can just put ourselves in a harder starting point. The end goal for us should be an improved quality of life, not a restriction to it. If we do the right things, we'll want it less. That's the first thing. The first tip I would give on that, and this goes right back to my nutrition days. I do remember some of it. And when I used to work with clients, I'm talking probably a decade ago when I did my qualifications. But I did have a few clients at the time. And I remember the easiest, the quickest route to change for people was, look, try and get 5 different colors on your plate. That's simple. So when you're putting vegetables on, people think they're eating healthy, but every vegetable on your plate is green. What people don't realize is the colors in foods, the aromas, the flavors, they're all signs that they have different antioxidants, different benefits, different things are going to help protect your cells from disease, different benefits are going to give your body. So if that's the first thing, and you look at your plate right now, after you've listened to this or before, whenever you're having dinner tonight, if you've got 3 different green vegetables, I'm not saying they're not all good, but you might find there's an opportunity here just to swap them out. Have one green, find a red pepper, or an orange pepper, go find some red tomato, go and find some purple sprouting broccoli instead of green. What gives them the color is often what is a sign of what the goodness it has inside it. And these are really simple, fun things we can do. You don't have to be an expert in vegetables or cooking or culinary expertise to be able to shift things around a little bit, because they all give us signs that they've got different vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. Phytos just means it's from a plant, but within the foods. So I think that's a really simple thing people can do. I'm not saying about cutting everything out. Yes, I would suggest cut out, the processed foods. But before you think about restriction, look at your plate and go, does the thing I'm about to eat have all these different vibrancy of colors? And can I shift that out during the course of the week? Because when you do that, different foods, different diversity of foods are going to provide your body with different beneficial bacteria. They're going to give you more diversity in your gut, going to improve your gut health. And then if you can't find a certain thing, then obviously there's supplements out there as well, which you might be able to access if your dietary sources are insufficient. But I'm trying to think of colors now. You get yellow peppers, you get bananas, there's so many colors out there.
Well, there was the veg place I get my veg from. They've got purple asparagus there as well. But
there you go.
Going back to what you were saying, really, diet for me is, I've never done a diet, as it were. I don't consider what I'm doing now a diet in the traditional sense.
I agree with it. I emphasize that. I know
diet for me. Diet for me is a way of eating, right? Now, you may change your way of eating at different seasons of your life, and I may not eat the same way in 10 years' time that I do today, or like I did 10 years ago, because things change in our environment, in our microbiome, in our stress, our circumstances, in our needs, right? So you shouldn't always, at least I don't believe that you should always restrict yourself to a type of eating and say that's the way it's going to be for the rest of your life, because it probably won't be. So that's the first thing. And also when you think of a diet, intrinsically for most people, a diet has a built-in end time, because you go, I'm going to go on this diet for 6 weeks, or I'm going to go on this diet until I fit into this dress. And psychologically, your mind, when it gets to that end goal, and let's say you've fitted into that dress or you've done your 6 weeks, it says, well, okay, I've done it, right? And therefore it becomes an end, right? For me, that 6 week point should be the start of the rest of your life, really. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to do this thing for 6 weeks, because your brain will switch off after 6 weeks. So it will make it a real struggle. So the other thing I was going to say, where you were talking about adding things in, normally I used to say that as well, like crowd out the bad by putting the good in. And you also have to think that when you overeat, or you eat lots and lots of kind of processed food, you want to eat more and more of it, because your body is actually looking for nutrients, and it doesn't get a lot of nutrients from that kind of food. And therefore that's why it's trying to consume more and more. When you naturally eat the healthier variety of food, like you were talking about, with all the different phytochemicals in, the fiber and so on, your body's getting what it needs. So actually it's very difficult to overeat when you're eating just pure whole foods effectively. So that's what the other thing I would say. And the other thing I wanted to say when it came to, I think I've lost my track now with it, but anyway, the point is, I think thinking about eating, that was it. So now I'm kind of thinking, instead of just crowding out the bad by putting in the good, because for some people that will work. For others, I think maybe an add one, take one approach is quite nice. So like, on your meal, on your plate, you, instead of, you add the extra vegetable and take away the other bad thing that you might have put on your plate. So you kind of like doing a swap And every time you try and add one, take one, add one, take one. So that can sometimes work for people as well. But both approaches are useful, I think.
I think that's quite nice. I think the only thing I would add to, I agree with everything you've said today, and I knew would be in agreement for most of today's conversation. And this may not be the same for everyone, because I know the dictionary definition of diet is, I've got it here, is the kind of food that a person, animal, or community habitually eats, right? But actually, when I think of the word diet, and there's two other, one noun and one verb here, which I think is quite interesting, because this is what I think of diet. And I've just literally gone to Google to see what it says here. For me, the word that I associate with diet immediately is the word restriction. And the second option here, when it comes down, is the second noun is a special course of food to which a person restricts themselves, and the verb restrict oneself to smaller amounts. And I think there's a connotation and an association with diet that is inherently negative, which is why I think it's immediately, it puts us in that negative bias of, this is a bad thing and therefore difficult, and I won't be able to sustain it, therefore I need an end time because this is going to be hard and horrible. So I'm with you, really. It's good to come away from the whole term diet altogether and just instead focus on lifestyle. And even going one level further, because I love your plan of take one away and replace. There's a reframing exercise here I think people can do. And you've talked, and we've both talked a lot about gratitude and being thankful and those things. I think, why limit it to a state of being? We can link that to our food. So if we, to do the following, I'm just thinking out loud with you talking about the replace one. For me, you replace that bad bit of food with a different colored thing on your plate. You've added a bit of red to your plate. You can then kind of focus on being grateful for the nutrients that new food is going to provide for you that you wouldn't have had before. So rather than focusing on restricting the thing on your plate that isn't there, you're reframing it to go, before I looked at my plate, I didn't have this. Now I'm going to be getting this, a new nutrient-dense food into my diet today that's going to make me feel better tomorrow, should help me. It's not going to inhibit your sleep. It's going to help with my sleep, my well-being, my vitality. We now know from today's episode, we didn't know before, the key chemicals that form the three pillars you discussed of physical health, sleep, and nutrition, or melatonin, which is a massive contributor to effective sleep, is produced in the gut. Serotonin, which is massively contributes to well-being and therefore motivation to exercise, is produced in the gut. So just by doing that swap around, that switcheroo, by putting a different color on your plate, you can look at it and be grateful and thankful to yourself for going, hey, I've made a really nutritious shift. It's going to give me new nutrients. It's going to improve my gut health. I'm going to feel great for it. And actually, it gives you a positive mindset towards dietary adjustments rather than a negative one of, I'm on a diet and I'm restricting myself. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. And I think, framing it like that, using that food time to have that gratitude is great. And also what I would say is how you eat is almost as important as what you eat. And so most of the time we're thinking about food all day and then we chug it down in 3 seconds. And your digestive enzymes start.
That is me a little bit. You're right.
Me too. But your digestive enzymes start in your mouth, right? That chewing process. And so I normally suggest, depending on obviously the food you're having, soup obviously would be an exception, but is aim for 25 or more chews. The average person, myself included, often when I'm not thinking about it, 10 to 15, and it's down. If that.
It actually starts with your eyes. I mean, some of the processes can start just by looking.
Yeah. Well, the saliva, because you're creating the saliva, and the digestive enzymes are starting off in the saliva, and that's a visual thing a lot of the time. So, and also for smell. I think. What I was going to say, though, is because you did lots of tests. I'm actually intrigued by the tests and that you did. What I would say for those people listening who are not so into the metrics and everything else is, as Nick discovered, and what my experience has shown is that even without the test, I think most people tend to benefit. But when they give up certain big ones like wheat, dairy, or gluten is basically wheat. So wheat and dairy tend to be a big one. So there are some other ones for different people, and yeast as well. So if you were to drop yeast, dairy, and gluten from your diet for say 10 days, and notice the difference, I think I would say probably 90% of the people listening that end up doing it if not 100%.
I mean, I certainly noticed results quicker than that. It surprised me, and also I love gluten-rich foods generally. I'll be honest. So, but the benefits have outweighed it. So, although I haven't been perfect, my test results I have followed, and they've been really, really good. So, I've got the results in front of me now. So it says anything over 20 is high reactivity of things you should eliminate from your diet, and there's over 194 foods here. So I had cow's milk at 93. Gluten at 93, goat's milk 44, yeast 44, sheep's milk 43, almond 31, tomato 28 randomly, and wheat at 26. Everything else, and we're talking about from papaya to nutmeg to merlot to Pinot Grigio to rice, all of that stuff was green. No issues at all, normal reactivity. But those particular foods had a really high reactivity in my intolerance test results. And yeah, I noticed the change.
How was that test? How was that test done? Was it a blood test? Or was
it was, and I'm glad you asked, actually. So the Zoe test was by a fecal stool sample. So you send that off, and they do it that way.
So that will test what's in your microbiome as opposed to reactivity things.
This one was a blood test. What I will say is you can get cheap tests done through hair follicles. My warning for you, if you do your research, is there is literally no evidence whatsoever that gives you any efficiency or reliability to the results of a hair follicle test. So people can send a bit of hair in a thing, and it's about 20 quid to get it done.
So with the blood test, though, this is my challenge with it, which I've done similar things in the past, because you say 194 foods tested, only 5 there, but like, I can't imagine that because I think the way that most of these blood tests work, they tend to see if there's basically usually an inflammatory response. And so if you haven't eaten papaya for 15 weeks because you haven't been on a tropical island, you're not going to show a response to being allergic to, say, papaya. Whereas, you probably had dairy and wheat.
Well, I understand your point. I can't remember the last time I ate almonds. That came up very high. There are other goat's milk. I can't remember the last time I had goat's milk specifically. The almonds came in my list. Tomatoes were on my list. And there are things, let's be honest, that I do a lot of, which is drink wine, which was green. Mushrooms I have every day, completely green. I have a lot of wheatgrass in all my smoothies, completely green. Banana is my favorite fruit. I eat a banana at least a day, sometimes 2 or 3 a day, completely green.
Those ones are fine because they're the ones that are good for you. But it's more like you say, okay, if you didn't have,
I wouldn't say almonds could. I drink about a bottle of wine in 2 days. That will come up green.
But what I'm saying is, like, it's more like the ones that you haven't had. So you're saying like the almonds that you didn't have.
Well, no, because I had cow's milk. Not often. I very rarely drink milk. But I had gluten every day. I mean, I eat bread.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So the gluten will show up because that's going to be something that's inflammatory.
But the highest scoring thing was cow's milk, which I don't drink.
Okay.
So
yeah, although you haven't said that, dairy tends to be in so many things that you wouldn't even think about until you start giving it up. But yeah, it's interesting.
That wouldn't explain why almonds showed up either, and no other nuts.
No, yeah. Although unless we have almonds in the bakeries that you get to, and there's cross contamination, but it would be interesting to do a test like that actually for myself. But I think, like I said, most people, you're not going to go too far wrong with like yeast, dairy, and gluten. If I'm honest, I'd be intrigued by tomatoes actually, because I've never liked tomatoes, right? And I don't know exactly why, right? I don't like the taste of them, but I do remember once, and I don't know how it got into me, but I went for like a colonic session, and you see the tube where the waste material goes down. And I'm sure once I saw like an undigested bit of tomato in there, and I was like, maybe my body doesn't digest it, and that's why I don't like it. I don't know how the tomato got there in the first place. Sometimes it sneaks in when you go to a place and they mix it in with the lettuce. But maybe I just don't digest tomato, and that's why I don't like it. So I'd be intrigued to do that test.
I think there's quite a bit in the skin of a tomato which can have impacts on things. But if people want to know the science that I followed in doing this, if it's interesting, I mean, there are some interesting reports out there. There's a Dr. Adam Fox, who's an allergy specialist from Guy's and St Thomas Hospital, who you might recognise because he does a lot of the BBC kind of doctor question and answer type bits. He talks about how to test for food intolerances. And the first thing, just to remind everyone about the hair follicle things, he said that people that get intolerance tests from a hair sample have absolutely no scientific validity at all. So I think that's worth bearing in mind. He said only a blood sample can be used to identify an allergy. But in addition, that blood sample must be able to check for IgE plus antibodies. Some don't. So again, you need to check that that's what it does. It must be a blood test for IgE antibodies for diagnosing an allergy. They do vary enormously. So it has to be a specific test, which is what...
But that's allergy. So we should specify, right? There's a very huge difference between allergy and intolerance. And okay, all right.
You've jumped ahead. You've jumped ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's for allergies. So I'm getting down there now. So now it says home test for intolerances. Again, no scientific validity for hair follicle tests. Intolerances, as it says, first thing here, intolerances are very different from allergies. Just to confirm what you just said there, Harry, but appreciate the early info. Well, it says again, blood tests for intolerances. Again, you must use a test that measures the level of antibodies called IgG. So the other one was IgE for allergy, IgG antibodies from the blood for intolerance, which it says is very different from the IgE antibody involved in the allergic reaction tests. But again, so when you're looking at your test providers, make sure that the blood tests you're getting do test for the right type of antibody. So if it's intolerance, you're looking for IgG, not IgE, and then you'll be able to get the result. And yeah, hopefully that's a bit of information there. You can people can do their own, but that's the way.
I would also say that blood tests are one way of testing for intolerances. There are other ways which are maybe a little bit more. I don't think your mate, your friend that you were quoting there would like them, but there are other ways such as muscle testing. And I remember doing a weird one probably over a decade ago, which I think is typically used a lot in Germany, but it was some sort of almost like an electrical impedance test. You kind of hold on to, I vaguely remember you hold on to something and they introduce within a confined jar or some sort, the allergen type thing. And it's a weird one, but I remember thinking it was very weird, but then looking it up, it was like used a lot in Germany.
So actually, he does highlight grip strength tests, again, having no scientific validity, according to him. He says here the only way you can do it if you're doing a home-based assessment for accuracy would be via the...
That's home-based. That's home-based, but I'm talking about with a practitioner. We're
dealing with people that listen to the show who want to try and get an assessment done. You know, there's we can take.
I mean, like I say, for those listening,
astronauts have different tests again, right? But you know, we're trying to keep it.
I wouldn't even. Honestly, I wouldn't even necessarily spend the money if you're just listening, you're casual observing, you're thinking, hey, you know, what would help improve my gut? What would help improve my mood? What would help improve my sleep? I would just say go for the big hitters, right? Yeast, dairy, gluten, knock them out, see what happens, because I can't think of anyone that's changed that in the past that hasn't had an improvement. Some smaller than others, and they've, like yourself, gone back to eating it and it's fine, because it might not be here or there for that person, but you can't go too far wrong.
I haven't gone back to eating it, by the way. I just said I've fallen off the wagon. There's a difference. I'm just getting lazy.
Okay. All right. Okay.
There's definitely a difference. I'm definitely trying.
But it's interesting because, like, I remember, like, years ago when we were doing, I don't know if it was the Venice one, Venice to Zagreb. It might have been Venice to Zagreb, but I do remember Venice to Zagreb because we started off obviously in Venice and it was like pizza time and things, and everyone was eating pizzas the night before our cycle trip, and I'm there going, I'm not eating these pizzas and things like that. And I used to get, well, I mean, we haven't done the cycle trip for about 7 years now, but you know, when we were doing the lunchtimes, you guys would all be eating your baguettes and things, and I'd have bought my gluten-free bread from the UK and my tofu and avocado and whatever else. And I used to get, I don't know, it was tough. I tell you what, it was tough being one person eating very differently in amongst 15 other people.
but
challenging.
Your diet at the time, let's be fair, wasn't just restricted to gluten-free. It was a whole different. You bought your own blenders, you did your whole own thing. Tofu, you were much more vegan-based then as well than you are now. I mean, it was just, which is fine. It was different. So that's a whole different conversation, probably. But you're probably not incorrect that if people cut out some of the major staples that people associate with intolerances, but then I wouldn't want to cut that out if I didn't need to, if I hadn't had the assessment, because it's one of my favorite foods. So I'm disappointed. So
but I'm only talking about 10 days or so, because to get an idea. But also, one other thing it's worth noting, and I think I mentioned this in my book, is it might be that a lot of us are intolerant to these things because they're so prevalent, right? If you think about
we eat too much
and gluten, it's in like 90% of more packaged foods. And so even though like people are like, oh yeah, quinoa is healthy and things like that, if we made everything out of quinoa, in 50 years time, we'd probably be all intolerant to quinoa. And also the way that
lots of colors.
Yeah, and also the way that the wheat has been manipulated over the thousands of years, certainly the last 50, 100 years, it's just very different. So I think that's part of the reason, because actually I now start to have a little bit more sourdough. There's a nice sourdough place in Brighton that just has no yeast in the bread, obviously, if it's pure sourdough. So it's just water, flour and salt. And provided I limit myself to like, I can actually have like 4 or 5 slices and I'll be fine. But if I limit myself to just 2 slices, it's going to be barely perceptible to me, if at all. Whereas if I had normal bread, which I think I did first time in years, but my mum had left in the freezer of my house in Brighton some bread, and I was really, really hungry one evening. I couldn't go anywhere, and I thought, you know what? And it was more of an awareness thing, just to experiment. What will this do? Am I just making this up in my head because it's been so long since I had normal bread? And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to have some slices of toast. And I did that, and my God, my sinuses like inflamed massively, and overnight I couldn't breathe. Well, I had to breathe through my mouth instead of my nose, and woke up the next day feeling terrible. I was like, I don't think that was placebo or nocebo. I think that was actually legit. So, yeah.
No, that's fair. That's fair enough. I think, conscious of time for people. I think.
We've gone way over.
We go a little bit. I think we know that in processed foods, there's lots of hidden things as well. So we won't go through that too much. But often sugar's disguised as other things or other names. I think there are some warning signs. I remember when I did my nutrition stuff, if something's advertised as healthy, I mean, that's often a warning sign to avoid it, unless
it's got fortified. The word fortified is one to look out for. Anything that says fortified, I'd probably stay away from.
Or zero fat or any of those things, I'd stay away from.
Zero fat means more sugar. Less fat means more sugar.
Well, exactly.
Have to replace it with something.
Steer away from those things. But I think also things like even the whole wheat bread. So it's nearly almost always made with an enriched flour. So it doesn't from whole wheat. So just little things to be mindful of.
I mean, the rules for me are quite simple, right? If it was made in a plant and not by a plant, it's probably not worth eating. If it has an advertising campaign or a celebrity promoting it, it's probably not worth eating. If it's built for shelf life instead of self-life, it's probably not worth eating. And when you go in the supermarkets, generally shop around the edges and you're going to have the better stuff.
Yeah. And I'm going to finish with the point that I was going to make just then, which was whether I have a gluten intolerance or not, and I've discovered it and I've cut it out of my diet, what it's forced me to do is actually eat different foods which are more vibrant in color. So my usual baguette or bit of pizza or sandwich for lunch has now been replaced by things that don't have gluten in, which typically for me are going to be healthy foods and vegetables and whole grains and legumes and nuts and all those things, which just give me actually, whether it's the benefit of the less gluten, I'm sure it's that as well. I'm probably also benefiting from actually just changing up diet to healthy foods as well. So it's kind of a double win, which links back to the replacement piece. So have a look at your plate, replace something with more color, can you replace it with something that's a little bit more nutritious, and then be grateful for the extra vitality that food will give you, the better sleep you'll experience, and the better microbiome that you'll experience as well. So, lots to take in.
Well, my question to you, Nick, is one which might be a bit oddball one, but would you ever consider a fecal transplant then? Do you think? Would you do a fecal transplant?
A fecal transport, as in what? No, I don't think
FMT.
I don't think it's necessary.
Because
If I had some disease that was struggling to find a cure for, I would have no issue with that kind of thing whatsoever. That thing doesn't really make me squeamish. I'm not too worried about fecal matter.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know how they. Like I say, you can.
I've got a dog. I've got to pick up dog mess every day. I'm not worried about that kind of thing.
I don't really want to eat. I mean,
I'm not too.
I would certainly. I think it's such an exciting area for those people that have like struggled with certain things. But what I would say is, it's even more interesting the fact that a lot of the kind of, I guess, negative things that donor might have, you might also inherit. And so it's kind of like doing a blood transfer, right? You've got to screen it. You've got to screen it. It does
bring a whole different, it would bring a whole different sense to the word eat shit. So, maybe suddenly we can put that into a positive context.
But I think it is an exciting area. Like I said, I think the future of medicine is going to be in ways that we can't possibly imagine, right? Like, the fecal transplants, the light therapies, sound therapies, vibrational therapies. I actually often shine those infrared and red lights on my stomach during the day to feed the mitochondria, give the energy. But I think it's also doing something for the microbes. I've got no evidence for that. I've not done any research, but inherently that feels good to me. So
on that note, Harry, conscious of time, eat shit, my friend. And I will look forward.
Well, you're the one having dinner tonight. I've already eaten my food.
I haven't eaten. No, I haven't finished work yet. And the time
which actually had lots of ginger and onions and garlic in it to feed.
It's 14 minutes to 9. I'm not interested in your dinner. I need to go eat. I'm going to let you go. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
As always, I'm going to give our listeners a break, and we'll bring back. I don't know what we're going to talk about next time. We'll have a chat. But look, you know what? It's really good to talk about something a little bit different to some of the challenges we've been facing with recently. Sorry to hear about your arguments with your mum. I hope
it's all part of the process. It's all part of the process. It's all good.
Stay happy. Stay happy.
Right.
Good man.
Yeah. Take care, guys. I hope you found value from this conversation, and please do leave a comment on one of our social channels. We like hearing from you. And
YouTube. You got on YouTube. We're building a really good following on YouTube at the minute. So come find us.
YouTube. Yeah. YouTube, Instagram.